Hello there, welcome to the Talking City podcast coming to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, joining me is Simon Bajkowski, and normally we would begin a Friday podcast by talking about the game that we've seen in midweek. That was City beating Copenhagen 3-1 to progress to the Champions League quarter-finals. But I want to start by talking about what happened before that, which was a very, very rare audience with Erling Haaland. Now, Simon, I was on a day off on Tuesday, and I mean, this may reflect how sad and engrossed in my job I am, but I generally stopped in my tracks when I saw it was Haaland speaking, because we normally get, with all due respect, someone who is perhaps less interesting, but Haaland was a big name for this stage of the competition, and he didn't really let us down, did he? When he gave us our time, it gave us his time in the press conference.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do anyone last year. I think we worked out he's done kind of 4 things with written media during, what is it, 18 months, 20 months. There was a Norwegian journalist who's actually arrived for sort of the final months of the season, who sort of came into Manchester that morning, and I think his head nearly fell off when he heard that Erling Haaland was speaking. It was like manna from heaven for him. And Haaland was not your average speaker. It's the first time he's done one of those Champions League press conferences where you essentially get 10, 15, 20 questions from various reporters about kind of anything and everything. And it was really, really good.
He started, I think the first question, he was like, I've won the treble. I've scored all these goals. I'm going to score more. And there was a bit of like arrogance in his voice. So I was watching. I was thinking, this is going to be good. This is what we want. And then he talks about his future and sort of dangles a bit of a carrot there and says he's happy here, but careful what you write, that sort of thing. And speaks about his miss. He was on good form, because we sort of expected when he came here that he was going to sort of repeat all press interviews that he did in Germany, where he doesn't say anything and he shuts down the questions and he's a bit miserable, but he was refreshingly open, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed him as soon as he came, and I think the sort of the worry then was that he might be monosyllabic or anything, and he just said no, but if you ask me stupid questions, I'll give you stupid answers. But he really has. I mean, we say he's done like 4 with written media. He's done like every broadcaster going, because broadcasters get to choose who they speak to. Who's usually the man of the match, who's usually Haaland. So he's done so many interviews during his time. He'll do like 10, 20 after games with different broadcasters. So he's been building up his repertoire, and it was like being in the room with a superstar, and that is not to do down any of the rest of the squad, because they're all really good. But sort of not having the chance to speak to him that often, and then just the words he was coming out with, it was like very much what Cristiano Ronaldo would say, or as Zlatan would say, but with more kind of self-awareness and deprecation. He had the whole room in the palm of his hand.
Yeah, I think he's got a presence, hasn't he? Like we stand in the mix zone and get regularly ignored by players, including Haaland, and some players will say no, thank you, I don't want to speak. Haaland just glares at you and stares, and it looks like you've offended his ancestors, but he does have that presence where he is just this big, like, worldwide superstar, and it felt like, sort of looking from the outside, that you guys felt it was an opportunity to sort of pick his brains and talk about everything and anything, and it's not disappointing, but it's a shame we've not been able to speak to him in that format before. But it was one of the things where it was worth the wait, do you think?
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's cynical or not, but it kind of felt like it was a bit of a charm offensive, and it was sort of very much in his way. The way he said, he was asked about Real Madrid and he said, I'm happy here, but tomorrow you never know what will happen. But you've got to write that I'm really happy at City, like, and sort of say, oh, I know this will make a huge headline. Like, he's so aware of everything, but it also felt like, this was an opportunity he took to be in front of a room full of journalists and be be charming and funny and witty and warm. And I think, he does have this reputation as a robot and a cyborg, and even like a Viking. It's not the friendliest thing to pull up. And if you are going to win the biggest individual prizes in the game, you need to have good PR, and you need to have, plenty of journalists and other people who are going to say, oh yeah, Erling Haaland is great at football, but what a talker as well. What a nice guy. And things like that. So, it was great for us to, have him in the room, but it probably did him a lot of good as well to, show the funny side of him, because his teammates all love him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone in the squad loves him and thinks he's hilarious. So even just showing a tiny bit of that in a public forum will probably do him the world of good.
And it came after that miss against United. He could have sort of decided, no, actually, they're going to ask me about that. I'm not going to do this press conference anymore. But he sort of approached it head on, and it helped that he did score in the game against United anyway, and he's got all the records. And he pointed out, as I think you mentioned in the past, he likes to point out how many goals he scored, and he knows exactly how many goals he scored. But he also admitted that it was the worst miss ever, I think he said, didn't he? And he attacked that head on and sort of controlled that own narrative about that, and reminded people that, yeah, he missed a really big chance, but also just remember how many goals he scored and how many trophies he's won at the same time.
Yeah, because he remembers how many goals he scored, and like he said, he's got 18 Premier League goals this season. He had 36 last year and set a record. Only 18, but he's still top of the charts. So but like you say, it wouldn't have been unheard of for a footballer to have a miss as bad as that on Sunday and say, you know what, I'm not doing this the next day. But he is so confident. He is confident enough in his own ability that he doesn't care. And he said, I will miss a lot of chances in the future, but I'm also gonna score a lot. And that, that is what one of the things that Pep loves about him so much, is just this ability to forget about missing sitters and things like that, and just keeping calm and taking the next chance that comes along.
I think Pep said that as well, hasn't he? That he is going to miss chances, but also he's going to score a hell of a lot of chances as well. And I think it felt like a bit of a bigger event than we would normally expect from sort of another player who might be good at the media, but just says what you expect them to say. This was a real insight into a player that we've not really heard of in that format before. We've heard more from Haaland this week, and we will come to that later ahead of the Liverpool game, and some certain comments from Trent Alexander-Arnold. But let's fast forward to Wednesday, where City beat Copenhagen. They were already in control of the tie with a 3-1 lead from the away leg. 2 goals in 8 minutes cemented it for City, and after that it was a bit of a non-event. A good goal from Copenhagen to just give their fans something to jump around about, and then Haaland gets a goal before half-time, and it's 6-2 on aggregate, and that's that. He did stay on for the majority of the game though, didn't he? The City made a lot of changes, but it felt like Haaland was given as much opportunity to score as many goals as he could, even if the game wasn't really made or built up for attacking in the second half.
Yeah, there were, 6 players that you would expect to start at Anfield left on the bench. Haaland played pretty much the entire game, and that is kind of a show of strength in his fitness and how he's looking, even though, he didn't really have much service. I thought Copenhagen were really good, and, I feel like Copenhagen have kind of been used to be like, oh, how rubbish the last 16 is. Oh, you never get this 10 years ago. You never get this 20 years ago. Champions League's rubbish. It's really boring. And it's like, no, actually, like, Copenhagen earned the right to be there by getting through a group with Galatasaray, Bayern, and United. And they played some good stuff. Their goal was lovely. They obviously didn't defend very well for the first 2 goals, but other than that, they were pretty stable, and they caused City problems over both games. So, City were kind of always going to be favourites, and it played out that way, but they still needed to play well. The first 20 minutes of the first leg were probably the best start City had all season. And yeah, I just thought it was at one point I thought it could get embarrassing for Copenhagen at the Etihad, and it didn't. So kind of credit to them. And what is the Champions League for if not for kind of teams like that getting through and getting more confident, and maybe we'll see them again at this stage next year.
There's a bit of a comparison to the Luton game in the Cup last year. They lost 6-2 on the night. Copenhagen lost 6-2 on aggregate, and we're coming away saying actually the opponents were quite good. They weren't the worst team in the world. They were just not as good as City. And I think Guardiola said that. He was like, if Copenhagen scored first and used that momentum to get a second, then things are getting quite difficult for City. And he was very, very happy that they started as quickly as they did. It helped that Alvarez's cross went through the hands of Grabara, but by that point, City had a lead, and it was probably done by the time Akanji had sort of stayed in that corner. And yeah, I think the fact that City are starting these games quite strongly bodes well, because they probably knew that there is tiredness in the squad. Guardiola said as much after the game. He was like, some players came to him and said, we're too tired. I think Bernardo and Foden were the players that he mentioned, and that's why they got a rest. He insisted it wasn't about Liverpool, whether you want to believe that or not. He was saying there is a lot of tiredness still floating around the squad. So it was a much changed side, but the fact that they came out and scored those goals is sort of a credit. And you just look at City's record. I think I can't remember the exact numbers, but there's a lot of games unbeaten at home. I think 9 wins in a row, is it? Or 10 wins in a row in the Champions League, which hasn't been done before. There's so many records that were sort of pointed out on Wednesday night. It was like some English sides have done this, some teams have done this at home, but basically the trend was City are very good in the Champions League and have been for a few seasons now, and that continued, and you would expect to continue into the quarterfinals. Was there anyone, Simon, who came in who doesn't normally play, who took the chance? I know you were quite impressed with Oscar Bob in the first half.
Yes, although he didn't do too much after the first half. I think no is probably the short answer. Nobody really came in and looked amazing. Rico Lewis kind of looked as rusty as you would expect, having played so little. I thought Manu Akanji was the best player, so that kind of adds to do you start Akanji or Walker on the right, given that Akanji's probably in better form, but Walker more easily allows you to sort of have your right back floating up the wing to allow others to come in ahead of him. Alvarez looked okay. If there's probably gonna be a place up for grabs at Anfield, whether it's Alvarez or Kovacic or or Bob even that comes in. So, but yeah, it was kind of a strange game, because after the first 2 goals, it was done. So you're sort of thinking there's not very much to play for.
I can imagine there was a lot of sort of casual viewers watching on the telly who saw those 2 goals go in and just turned off and put the Real Madrid game on, because you just knew that contest was done. I thought Alvarez, we sort of noticed he played in a bit of a different position, didn't he? Because when he arrived, he was this winger, and then he never played on the wing because he was always sort of a deputy to Haaland or playing as number 10, and that's where he's impressed this season. He was playing not even as much as a winger, sort of as a left midfielder, which is quite different to what we expect. And that allowed Oscar Bob to come in inside those channels. And that might be an interesting way to potentially sort of adapt to the Grealish injury and sort of have Alvarez, who's quite clever and tidy on the ball, hugging that touchline and drawing players out. I wonder if we'll see that again, and if the Copenhagen game was a little bit of a sort of a test to see if that worked. And when he's got a goal and assist inside the first 10 minutes, then you suggest it would do. But you could also say that there were more set piece goals, weren't they, than any sort of fancy moves. But I would say Alvarez, considering he sort of dropped out of the team with De Bruyne coming back, and you've essentially got De Bruyne, Foden, Bernardo, and Alvarez all fighting for 3 places. Alvarez has dropped out, and in the last couple of games off the bench in the derby against Copenhagen, he's sort of come back and responded and said, listen, I'm still providing these goals, these assists, and giving Guardiola something to think about. I would guess he would start against Liverpool. I'm not sure where, but I think he's probably done enough, or your face suggests you don't think so?
Well, I don't know. You always kind of were playing Alvarez and playing Doku in the derby kind of suggested Pep being like, I am ready to attack, rather than playing Kovacic, who gives you kind of that extra bit of security in midfield. I don't know whether with it being Liverpool away, you would want that bit more extra security and kind of just safety in midfield, rather than kind of, with Alvarez, a lot of the time when he has been in midfield, it has recently looked a bit uneven. So I if I was betting on it, I would put my money on Kovacic, but I think Alvarez certainly did well enough on Wednesday night to firmly kind of lay his hat in the ring, and it wouldn't surprise me if Alvarez started. I'm probably just a bit more conservative thinking.
And he's also an option that can come off the bench if needed and sort of add another dimension, which might be how he fits into the squad for the rest of the season. Let's leave part one there. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the Champions League and start to look ahead to Liverpool on Sunday. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Now, after the game on Wednesday, Guardiola sort of admitted that he is still scared of the other teams in the Champions League. The question was sort of put to him that you're doing so well in the Champions League, you've won it, you've won all these games in a row, that surely you should be sort of unbeatable, or not unbeatable, but you have nothing to fear anymore. And he said, listen, they might be scared of us, but we are also scared of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain. He sent a bit of a warning back, and he was like, they have every right to be scared of us as well. They don't want to be playing City, but it's getting to the stage now where City are probably going to meet one of these big sides again. Last year it was Bayern Munich, then Real Madrid. It's going to be an interesting draw next week, isn't it, to see who City get and how they're tested in the middle of the title running as well. Do you agree with Pep's side that they should still be scared of the other teams in Europe?
I mean, not really, but at the same time, there's this kind of feeling that our City are going to win the Champions League. Our City are going to win. No one's going to beat them. And it kind of comes from them winning so much and looking unbeatable at certain points, but it also kind of comes, I think, from people who haven't watched them that much this season. They're really struggling to keep clean sheets, and they haven't beaten one of the best teams in England yet. Drew with Liverpool, lost to Arsenal, drew with Spurs, lost to Villa. You've got to go down the table to like United to get a team that they've beaten. So I think there is a bit of an unknown element with how they will do against any other side. I think you look at Bayern Munich and you think they're not having a good season. You look at Real Madrid and you think, they've kind of only just scraped by RB Leipzig, who were very good. But then you know that those clubs will do everything they can to turn it on for the latter stages. City are probably fortunate that two of the best teams in Europe this season, in Liverpool and Bayer Leverkusen, aren't in the Champions League, because they would really give City a run for the money. So I think Guardiola saying about how scared they are is kind of an effort to push back at this idea that it's dead easy for City and they're going to waltz away with it. But it's also the reality of we don't know how good they are. We will find out, I think, on Sunday as a start, and then against Arsenal at the end of the month. But there's still a lot of unknowns around the last few months.
The thing is, I agree with what you're saying there. We don't know how good they are, and the record against the top 6, 7, 8 is not as good as it has been. I think I was looking at City's wins. I think they've won, I'll find the stats, but the most common result that they've won is 3-1. So they're doing well, but they've they're still conceding that goal, and it's not perfect, is it? But they're however many wins in a row, they're unbeaten in 21. I think it's, if you're not perfect and you're still unbeaten in 21 and you're going into this crucial run of games in the title race in the Champions League, it's not a bad place to be, and you've still got some players to come back from injury. It's a tricky one, but I do agree with you that this next week or the next couple of games in the Premier League especially are going to just show us how good they are. I was asked by someone the other day, like, are City better than, are they the best team in the league this year? Are they better than they were? And I was like, I don't know. And just as you say, like, they are winning games and they're doing what they need to do to stay there, but I'm not sure they're the best team. And they're not.
Yeah,
I don't think they're as good as they have been in previous years. So it will be interesting to see. But Guardiola he pointed out at the Real Madrid result, and he was like, we beat Leipzig twice in the group stage relatively comfortably, and Real Madrid only just scraped past them. So he used that as an example to say, bit of context, how difficult it is. And obviously Copenhagen finished above United and Galatasaray, took a point off Bayern Munich. They're doing well in sort of in the wider context, but when you look at the games, you're like, they could be a bit better. It's a weird one, isn't it? And I think we're going to see, I don't know which way, but I think we're going to see this week where they actually stand.
Yeah, and also this month, because, I think they can still lose at Anfield and still win the league. I think it'd be very difficult, but I sort of think the bigger one is probably Arsenal at home, because everyone's expecting City to just steamroller Arsenal, because that's what they did last season. Arsenal turned up and just got battered. It was men against boys, and kind of everyone's expecting that. But the way Arsenal have played in 2024 is looking like they will not do that. So, if City can get a draw at Anfield and beat Arsenal, I think that will be very good and set them up for, still to be chasing in April and May. And if Liverpool win every game from here on in, then, what can you do? You hold your hands up. But I think kind of, City haven't been as clinical at home and as dominant at home as they were last season. So I think kind of the Arsenal game is almost bigger than Liverpool in seeing where City are at. But obviously, Sunday is the acid test, because the record's been so bad at Anfield, and sort of winning would be so huge and seen as so huge in the title race, and everyone else would look at that result and think, oh no, City are on it again. So Liverpool is kind of showier, but I think Arsenal is almost more important.
I can see that. I think if you're going to lose one, I would agree. Yeah, probably. Oh, actually, I don't know, because you want to keep it. You don't want to give Liverpool a 4-point lead, but also you have the opportunity, if you beat Arsenal, to sort of jettison them a bit and make it a 2-horse race. So I think they would take 4 points. I don't know how, from whatever combination of results, if you offered them now. Yeah. I just think losing either is a bit difficult. But you've mentioned in the past, City's away record is better than it was last season.
Yeah,
they've not, as you say, they've not won at Anfield in a long time. They've won once, but it was behind closed doors. It was very, very good performance that day. But they do have that sort of hoodoo at Anfield. Do you think this is the one where they can do it in front of fans and silence the famous Anfield crowd and get 3 points?
I mean, it's a bit like winning the Champions League. Like, for the last 5 years, we've been saying, oh, they've got a squad that can win the Champions League. They just haven't done it. Whereas finally they did. So again, they've got the team, they've got the players to go and win at Anfield. And I don't like making loads about the crowd, because they did absolutely smash them in COVID. But you just think back to last year where, Foden's goal got disallowed. Guardiola really revved up the crowd, and like the crowd hadn't been that big until then. But then, Guardiola revs them up, and then suddenly it's like City are in a different game. And I think it was João Cancelo's error, so a sign of how different City were. But the crowd made a difference, because sort of Pep brought them into the game. So I think the manager talks a lot about sort of passes. That's how to kind of diffuse a crowd and take away, and City will will look to do that, and they certainly have the ability to win at Anfield. And yeah, I think as long as they come away without a defeat, they'll feel very happy. But a win would be seismic.
I think that's it. It's a draw would keep things as it is, and would make the Arsenal game a bit bigger. But also, City, I think, will back themselves to get more of a run towards the end of the season, and hope that Liverpool drop points here and there. I think a win would be a massive statement of intent. But you can also imagine the headlines if Liverpool win and they go 4 points clear, and this is their time, and it's perfect for Klopp, and it's going to be that sort of Klopp factor as well. The last Premier League game between Klopp and Pep, almost certainly it's a chance for them to give him this sort of second title that he's deserved. We'll hear later it means more to them. Well, I think when you look back at Klopp's
38 games deserves it.
I feel like I'm talking to Pep Guardiola here, but I think if you look back at Klopp's period, that team probably deserves more than one Premier League title. But also City deserve their 5 titles, or however many it is. It's a balance on
team. Yeah. It's I mean, Liverpool have won every trophy, just as City have won every trophy. But the league campaign is always the biggest test. It's how good are you over 38 games. Don't matter if you beat Man City at Anfield every season. Can you win the other 37 or do better in the other 37? And City have been just fundamentally better than them. It's been a cracking rivalry, and there've been terrific games between the two, and they've pushed each other all the way. But in terms of trophies, it's sort of not a contest. City have absolutely smashed them.
Yeah, no, I mean you cannot argue, can you, with the record? And there's sort of comparisons of spending and net spend and stuff, but it's like, if you win the trophies, I think compared to Guardiola and Klopp, when the spending per trophy is compared, there's 5 million in it in terms of per signing, and it's City have spent more, but they've won more. And when it's sort of remembered that 20, 30 years, it'll be City were the best team. The reason I say Liverpool deserve more titles or more trophies is that they've got 90 plus points for a number of seasons. Was it 97 points they won that year that City got one more? Yeah. It's one, if you get 97 points, you don't win the title. I think you are right to be a little bit disappointed, but when it's one of them, at the same time, you come up against a team like City, and it's probably a bit of bad luck, but also, I don't know. I think both statements are right, that Liverpool probably should have had more, but also City deserve all of the titles that they've had. It's a tricky situation, but I think Sunday's going to have a little bit more edge with it being sort of the final Pep Klopp meeting in the league. Might meet in the cup, we don't know, but I think Guardiola will be quite keen to avoid those sort of Klopp fist bumps at the end and big celebrations as well. I will be looking at the touchline just as much as on the pitch.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's going to be the final Pep Klopp meeting until they meet in the FA Cup semis next month, and then we do it all over again.
I think another City Liverpool Cup semi-final at Wembley is probably what City fans don't want, but it's still possible, and they've obviously got the quadruple still to secure. That isn't really a quadruple, but we'll let them off.
It's a quadruple. It's just not the.
Yeah, I mean, it was like last year when we were writing about the treble. It was like a historic treble, but it's been done before. But also, it's historic for City. It's like you've got to
but it is the treble. Whereas you can't have the quadruple without the Champions League.
No, not
you
at all.
Win 4 trophies, but you can't have the quad.
I wonder if they'll take the Formidables title off City if they win the Europa League. We'll leave it there because we have some quite eye-catching comments from Trent Alexander-Arnold to come back to after this short break. Welcome back. Now, Yeah, Trent Alexander-Arnold says Liverpool's trophies and successes mean more to them and their fans because of a thinly veiled reference to the financial situations at both clubs, basically suggesting City have spent more and Liverpool have been run on a shoestring, so they've sort of done this classic underdog story. First of all, Simon, load of rubbish, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I would say how do I put this? It's sort of ingrained in the Liverpool philosophy. It's a myth. It's a bit like Barcelona have more than a club. Liverpool have this ingrained philosophy. This means more. This means more. I don't know if they're still up, but it used to be on the drive into Anfield. There would be banners up and whatever saying this means more. It's in the dressing room, I think, or the sign. It's so it's perfectly understandable that people who've been brought up in that culture would think that it does mean more. But it's also perfectly understandable that people not in that culture can say, no, that's just a load of propaganda. They talk about like financials. What are we talking about? Are we talking about transfer spend? Are we talking about Liverpool trying to furlough the staff in the pandemic until they got sort of embarrassed into not doing? It's where do you draw the line? It's this effort to sort of paint Liverpool as the moral champions when I think you can point to several episodes when they haven't been, and City haven't been either on a number of occasions. It's not been a particularly pleasant rivalry between them. But it would be nice if we could just kind of crack on without this kind of needless comment ahead of the game. Like you said, if it's like 5 million between spend per trophy, then like what is that? It's nothing when you talk about the sums involved. So Alexander-Arnold, you can perfectly see why he thinks that. But it's very one-sided, and it's just a stupid thing to say ahead of a derby because it riles people up. And the last thing we need in this rivalry is people being riled up, because when they're riled up, they do and say stupid things, and then there'll be more bad headlines around a game that kind of should be focused on the football.
I think the first thing I thought when I saw it was he's not aiming this comment at anyone other than the Liverpool fans that it sort of represents, really, and it will have gone down very, very well among the Liverpool fan base. He will have known as well that City fans will have reacted as they did. We've seen Erling Haaland hit back. It was put to him, did one of those little smiles where he was like, I know what I want to say, but I know what I should probably not say at the same time. And he basically said, we've won the treble and I know how that feels, and he doesn't know how that feels. And it was quite, for Haaland, it was quite a diplomatic response. And I think Ruben Dias has said, we're a big club and big clubs operate by not speaking about other clubs. And a couple of sort of bites back, if you like. I can imagine that Pep Guardiola will be very reluctant to say anything on the subject, but it can also serve as motivation. However much Trent Alexander-Arnold might get some sort of rise or whatever he wants out of his Liverpool fans to sort of spur them on, it's probably going to get the City players and fans sort of wound up as well. It's that cliche, like he's in Guardiola's team talk for him.
Yeah, it just buys into everything that City think. City think they don't get enough credit for everything they do, and they think that Liverpool get a lot of credit for the things that they do. You kind of listen to Guardiola talking about the Carabao Cups and how nobody treated it seriously when he arrived, and then suddenly Liverpool's win over Chelsea is being treated like it's a different competition. It's just needless. And Alexander-Arnold might be speaking to the Liverpool fans, but he's got to know that his comments don't come in a vacuum. And Haaland's bite back was kind of perfectly done. And Diaz as well. Like, stick to talking about your own club, pal. And you can't talk about a treble because you haven't won one. So I sort of think, I'm not sure. I sort of think Pep is unlikely to say anything unless Klopp says something beforehand, although I don't know because they were in the Europa League last night whether they've got a press conference or not. So, I just kind of, like you say, it is needless, and whatever sort of help it does give to Liverpool, it also just perfectly crystallises for City an opportunity to go out and prove him wrong and celebrate in his face.
I mean, it's probably a good thing that Alexander-Arnold is injured for the game, because it would have been quite interesting to see sort of the treatment he got. I mean, he doesn't strike me as someone who cares what opposition fans, especially City and players, think, but it would have been quite interesting to see the reception he got from the away fans. I'm sure we will hear a certain chant from the away end about, has anyone else won a treble? Fill in the rest, but I think it's going to.
I wondered where you were going. Give a bit of. I was a bit
worried. No, I'm always professional on here, but I do think it's given City sort of the push they need to sort of say, this is like, you need something like that, don't you, to rally around. There's obviously the title implications, but having that as well, a bit something a bit personal, I think, and it'll probably do City more good than not. Guardiola was insistent he wasn't going to speak about Liverpool in his press conference after Copenhagen, and to be fair to him, he was like, if I speak about Liverpool now, you'll have nothing to talk about on Friday. I mean, Alexander-Arnold has changed that, but he would only say he'll speak about Liverpool on Friday. One of the questions that was put to him that he ignored was, is it an advantage that City have played on Wednesday at home when Liverpool have played away from home on Thursday in the Europa League? And they made some changes. Mo Salah's back, but was on the bench. I think Van Dijk was on the bench. It looks like they've had a similar approach to their win at Sparta Prague as City did against Copenhagen, but that extra day and the lack of travelling should work in City's favour, or I don't know. Is that too simplistic?
No, it can be decisive in things like that. It's really worked out in City's favour. Although kind of before anyone says, oh, well, that's unfair, well, City, you've got an extra day because they qualified for the Champions League and Liverpool only qualified for the Europa League. So that is the sort of reward from success, I suppose. It's just the way it's fallen, but not only having an extra day, but being able to rest Bernardo Silva and Phil Foden and players like that should really help City to come in with fresh legs.
So we can sort of pick out the starting lineup, really, can't we? Because he sort of rotated Diaz and Stones. You would expect those two to be the centre backs. Ake had a rest, Walker had a rest, although you were suggesting that Akanji might be an option. Rodri will start. He came off against Copenhagen. It's that other midfielder, isn't it? Because you would expect De Bruyne, Foden, Bernardo, and Haaland to be there. So it's whether you play Kovacic or Alvarez. But it feels like 10 of the 11 is basically set. Are we getting closer to the strongest 11? Do you think?
I think so. I mean, you would think that Grealish would have a good chance of making it when he's fit. But yeah, I think it's kind of it's harshest on Akanji because I think he has been very good. But it's more just kind of a system thing, which is funny because the system last year was not set up for Kyle Walker, and that's why he was out of the team. But the tweak this season with losing Mahrez and not really replacing him has kind of seen Walker come back into the picture. But yeah, I think it is just that one kind of spot. Do you go Kovacic or Alvarez?
I was banging the drum for Alvarez earlier, but I can see the argument for Kovacic at Anfield, and I think he's done quite well recently to sort of show what he can do in that midfield role. And with him there, you can have Bernardo and Foden sort of floating in the sort of wide central areas. You've got De Bruyne a bit further up, which can be very dangerous. I think that's an easier lineup to envisage than Alvarez, because you would expect Alvarez to be central. So De Bruyne's further back. It's a few more sort of players to move around if you have Alvarez in there. However, however well he played against Copenhagen, and he does have that option now on the left wing. But I think, my Kovacic and Rodri double pivot. And any objections, or are you in the pro Kovacic camp?
No, I'm pro Kovacic. It's just that uncertainty if Alvarez plays as to, like say, where everyone goes. And, there are some benefits to uncertainty in that the opposition is uncertain as to where people go. But I think City have got kind of enough about them to be fluid in their positions without having both Alvarez, Foden and De Bruyne are all kind of wanting to operate in the same space.
And I think they're getting better and better, aren't they, about who goes inside when and who stays outside. And that understanding is ever improving. Before we go, Si, let's get a score prediction. I think this is going to be one of the most difficult predictions of the season, really, isn't it?
Yes. I'll be brave. I'll go for your favourite scoreline of 3-1.
3-1 City. I wasn't going to go that. I was going to go 2-2. I think there'll be similarly. I think there'll be goals, but I think they'll cancel each other out.
Yeah, part of me thinks there's going to be a big refereeing decision.
Perfect. Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Well, as we know, they all go against Liverpool until they go in Liverpool's favour.
What's Paul Tierney doing? Yeah.
Who is the referee for Sunday? We will leave it there, and we will be back on Monday to discuss everything that happened at Anfield. We don't know what score it's going to be, but I think we can assume there will be a lot of talking points, whatever happens. Even if it's a 0-0, something's gonna happen that we will be able to talk about and decipher. So we will be back on Monday to do just that. Give us a like and a follow on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you find us, on your podcasts, on YouTube. Leave us a rating, whatever you can do to support us. We do appreciate that. Thank you very much, and we will be back next week.